Hey everyone, and welcome to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Unreal Season 1, Episode 5. It's called Truth. So spoilers for the episode, as always. This is a Patreon-sponsored review, so thank you very much to Board Now for picking this series. This is an interesting episode, I would say, mainly because this show, by and large, and it's only been 4 episodes before this one, but there's been a lot of plots or moments where you think, oh, something is getting to Rachel, she's hesitant to do something, but then there's almost like a dark little twist that she was intentionally doing the thing to get a reaction for the TV show or to inspire or manipulate a character into doing something. And this episode starts out plain like that, where she's manipulating Faith to do a bunch of stuff. The main thing being she's trying to get her to lose her virginity to Adam when they go on this trip to her hometown as part of one of the episodes of the show, and this is her goal of trying to do something big for ratings for that week, is to tell a story about this fully grown woman losing her virginity. And what I really liked about this is that it's got her doing that, it's got her pushing her and prodding her and suggesting, hey, take your relationship to the next level, do this, do that. But when she actually pushes hard enough, some truth, the title of the episode, funnily enough, starts coming out of the closet, to put it in a blunt way, where it becomes clear that Faith has some kind of feelings for her best friend, who I'm going to refer to as not Jennifer Beal, because she reminded me a lot of Jennifer Beal. But, you know, when we see this best friend character and the way they talk to each other, the way that they kind of seem to have this little tiff off to the side, it seems like maybe the friend's a bit uncomfortable with everything that's going on. But we also see that Faith comes from this very religious community. Her gran that she lives with and looks after is very religious and talks about it being God's house and God's town and all that stuff, which maybe suggests why she's not really addressed or come to terms with her feelings is because she's living in a very conservative community and it's more difficult for her to reach those conclusions. And I think what was so good about this episode is that it kind of made several of the main characters look better by the end of it. Particularly Rachel in the main sense, because she's the one who's actually promoting and manipulating people, Faith in this case, to do stuff. And then at a certain point, she seems to actually try and shelter Faith from the fallout of what might happen, of trying to make sure that the footage of her coming out, when that eventually happens, doesn't make it to TV, because Faith's not ready for everyone else to know this yet. Yeah, she's finally admitted it to herself, she's finally admitted it to a few of them, but she's not ready for her community to necessarily know it. She does think she is at one point in the episode, and that's a whole plot beat later on, but just forgetting that for a minute, just this broad idea that Rachel goes out of her way to try and help her conceal that, even though it costs them the spicy story for that episode, and she'll come up with something else. They'll even fake it. In fact, what I thought was very interesting is that by the end of the episode, Rachel actually has Faith participating in faking a story. It's like, hey, we need a story for this episode, you can do this. We don't even see this conversation, we just see Faith playing along, like, hey, we're going to go up to the window in silhouette and pretend we're having sex. And there you go, that's your exciting story. The original story that she was supposed to get for real, they're just going to fake now. And I thought it was interesting to actually bring the contestant into the I don't know, the charade, like have them actually just act it out and completely manipulate it in a more ethical sense. At least, you know, you could argue it's unethical for the audience, but let's be honest, if you're watching reality TV, I think if you're just buying everything they're telling you at face value, then that's on you, right? Ultimately, it's entertainment. All right, I don't find it very entertaining, but people do. People find that shit entertaining. So I thought that was also an interesting little wrinkle to it. But Rachel comes out looking really good, but so does Adam and Jeremy as well, even, because they're all there for this, right? Adam's obviously there because he's part of the show and visiting her that night. Or not even that night, that like whole on a weekend or whatever it is. And then Jeremy's there as the camera operator. And even he has some moments here where, like, he almost is like acting like something of an angel on Rachel's shoulder, where him watching to see what she does with it and how she like handles the situation almost like helps her make the right choices in some way because she wants to not disappoint him. And we'll talk more about their relationship as well, because that's obviously a big part of this one too. But I thought even Adam, like, he picks Faith, right, early on for this trip. Apparently, as an act of defiance, Rachel manipulated him off screen right before the start of the episode. She said, "Hey, cut Faith," and he rebelled by picking her, but that's what she wanted, right? So we get this sense that even between the episodes, Rachel's pulling all sorts of like simple reverse psychology tactics to get what she wants. But once they're on the trip, and Faith is, like interacting with Adam, and he's being sweet and nice to the Gran, and he's saying and doing all the right things, and Rachel's prodding her to try and like push her into things. And there was a moment actually when it felt like she was exploiting the idea that Faith is in the closet, right? Before Faith is admitted death, and Rachel's just kind of seen enough little bits of evidence to kind of realize it. And she does an interview with her where Faith's on camera and she's answering questions about whatever. And Rachel starts prodding at the idea that there's someone else that like is important to her, and she brings up her best friend, almost like she's trying to force her out in the interview, and it comes across kind of mean and vicious, but it's actually, and this is still mean for the record, but like she's actually using it to manipulate Faith into wanting to go through with the virginity losing, right? She's using this because Faith, instead of answering the tough question, relents and gives in to the other thing that Rachel's been prodding her to do, which is to have sex for the first time. And it feels kind of like, oh, Rachel's just pulled off this little tactic here to force her into this situation, and it doesn't quite work. But the reason why everyone comes out looking quite good, even Rachel, obviously everything Rachel does after the coming out happens puts her in a good light and gives her a bit of a redemptive kind of quality, but is the moment where Faith actually does this. It's kind of a two-part thing where Faith is in a scene with Adam, and they're filming it, and they're in like the barn, and she's telling them stories about how her grandfather built this barn or some stuff like that. And she just kind of like says screw it and kisses Adam in the middle of this little like date they're having. And it's kind of an awkward kiss, but he smiles and he plays along nice, and she's like, "Oh, was that terrible?" And he's like, No, it was lovely, right?" And there's just this little moment where she has to like, well, first of all, she says, "Hey, I want you to take my virginity," which is obviously hits him, and he's like, "Oh, it's an honor." Like, I don't think he was expecting that sentence coming out of her mouth. But then she immediately says, "Oh, I need a minute," and she goes off and is kind of like, emotionally being hit by everything she's sort of doing. Everything's going very fast. Rachel goes off to see her one-on-one, and this is where Rachel uses her powers for good, for lack of a better term, where she kind of provokes her gently to get her to admit what she's actually going through and thinking, possibly even feeling a little bit guilty that she kind of almost forced her into this situation where she was going to have sex with a man when she doesn't really want to. And she's like, "Hey, like, is it possible that you have feelings for someone else?" I think the first thing she says, actually, to kind of broach the subject is like, "Hey, have you ever kissed anyone before properly?" And she's like, "Properly? I don't know." And she's like, "Oh, hey, did you?" And she brings up like practicing on pillows with her best friend when they were younger, and she's like, "Yeah, did you practice on each other too?" And she kind of awkwardly goes like, "What? No, what? No." But that's kind of like how she sort of goes down the conversation. But I liked where this went though, because it felt like she was prodding her and using her manipulation, but here it wasn't so much manipulating as it was trying to like get her to come to terms with what she's feeling right now. It felt like a noble goal was in mind as she was trying to extract this information out of her, because there's no cameras, right? This is the important part of this scene. There's no cameras or microphones anywhere. This is purely a one-on-one conversation, and it's about getting her to this point where she's going to do this. Now, I'm sure Rachel at this point is still thinking, oh, if she comes out on air, if we film her saying she's gay, then that can be a big story for the episode instead, and that's still worth doing. But regardless of that, it still feels like it's a good thing that she's doing in the scene, and she is like, "Hey, why don't you just say it out loud once and see if God strikes you down?" Because that's Faith's big concern. She thinks like she won't be allowed into heaven. She's super worried about everything and whatever. But when they go back to the scene with Adam and they're sitting in the barn, she just sort of says, "Hey, Adam, I need to tell you something. Like, I'm not attracted to you. I'm actually attracted to someone else." And kind of admits that she's gay. I can't remember the exact phrasing she used, but I think Adam came out of this scene looking quite decent for as much of a, I'll just say a tit that he can be at times with his douchebaggery and whatnot. He came out of this looking quite good because his reaction to her coming out was just kind of like to smile and sort of be happy for her. It was actually kind of genuinely nice to see. And, you know, Jeremy's smiling over the camera, and it feels like they're all kind of like, you know, in the moment with her. No one's like being cynical here. It doesn't feel like it's like every other scene that happens in this show when they're filming a contestant. It felt like this was a genuine thing that someone actually wanted or needed to like come to terms with and was able to do so. But of course, the episode from that point kind of takes this little bit of a turn where she's like, oh, like, well, I'm ready to admit it to myself. I'm not ready to like say this to my gran. She will disown me. And she talks to her friend, her potential romantic partner, if all goes well. And she's not ready for this to come out yet. Like, she's receptive to it, and they clearly care about each other, but she's a Bible studies teacher, and it's not going to go well in this very conservative Mississippi, like, small town they live in. So Faith actually almost like does this complete 180 from being scared to say it, where she actually comes up to them and says, hey, at that town fair we're going to tomorrow, I'm going to come out on stage and I'm going to show them all that God doesn't hate me and it's going to change this community for the better. And immediately, like, Rachel and Jeremy are like looking shit scared because they know this isn't going to work, that this is actually going to lead to the bigotry, the hatred that Faith was originally worried about, that this is too bold a move, that this is actually going to backfire. And I think this is where I think they all start coming out looking really good in this episode, because it feels like they're genuinely concerned and want to try and deal with this. Between Rachel trying to, like, you know, stop the footage from being logged, although Jeremy says, hey, like, if you tell me in advance, I'll do what I can to like mitigate that sort of stuff. But the new person in charge of all the production stuff is like going to question where that SD card went. They're going to question why something was erased. Like, I can't do that. You're going to have to intercept it at the office, which is at least to Jay being involved a little bit, where Rachel calls Jay and says, hey, can you like stop this from like reaching, like, intercept it and make sure it doesn't get used or seen by anyone. And it seems like she's appealing to Jay by saying, hey, do you remember when you came out to your parents and how awful that was? Yeah, well, this is helping out someone else who's in that kind of process, and it's going to be a disaster for them. Which actually, Jay ends up looking the worst in a lot of ways in the end of this episode, because he actually sells out and gives it to Chet just because it might give him a promotion, effectively. Which, coming from a gay character, feels especially kind of heinous. There's a great exchange between them, actually, where Rachel, you know, because he says, oh, like, don't pretend that you wouldn't have done anything like this to get ahead or whatever. And Rachel says, well, yeah, but, like, that doesn't mean that I'm going to... I can't remember exactly how she phrased it, but she basically said, like, that doesn't mean that I shouldn't stop someone else who still has a chance of being saved. Right? The idea being that she sees herself as, like, she's already committed all the sin, she's already this monster, but Jay could have maybe still came out of this, like, not an asshole and, like, just turned into this, like, heinous monster that manipulates people or whatever, right? I like that exchange. I thought it was good. Yeah, and again, like, everyone kind of works together to end up helping Faith, because when Faith goes up on stage at this town's fair and she's like building up to coming out to this very conservative audience, eventually you can see her getting scared. You can see her having second thoughts and realizing this might have been a bad idea. So Rachel thinks quickly on her feet and gives like a necklace to Adam to go up and give her on stage. It looks like he's about to propose. He doesn't, but he basically just comes up, interrupts her, and says, hey, can I ask you to stay on this journey with me for one more week? And he's basically just giving her out, right? He's giving her an out of the moment she's created for herself, so she doesn't have to actually go through with saying what she was about to say, and it stopped this from happening right now. And I thought, just between the characters looking more like decent people, between the Rachel, Adam and even Jeremy, who's becoming a little bit more fleshed out at this point. I think it was a nice look at a character who's in this predicament of being in this conservative place and wanting to come out, and just the difference between the moment of them admitting to themselves and then how that might not equal to being ready to just shout it from the rooftops to everyone around them. Yes, some of these people around her are okay with it. I mean, I think she even says at one point, yeah, this is okay in like Hollywood land, but like out here in, in a small town in Mississippi, where everyone still talks about it being God's place and whatnot, and not so much. I thought all that was very sweet. I thought it was a nice story. I think Faith as a character has been, she's had a purpose up until this point, but I think this episode kind of cemented like what the point of her character is now. Like, she was there for the other girls to sort of say mean things about before she, like, even the start of this episode, the way that Quinn just says, go and get her cherry popped in a very sort of like blunt way right before the opening title hits. I think this episode did a lot to flesh that character out and really feel like, oh, this character, they had something to say with this character, and it was a really effective story, I thought, going through it. And the fact that a lot of the other, kind of what I was getting at the start is this idea that Rachel does these like super extreme manipulating things and tries to get content out of it, and it was kind of nice to see her push too far and realize that she has went over a line, and then kind of do everything in her power to help at that point and sort of rein it back in a little bit. It just, it gave a little bit. And the idea that that came alongside her kind of like properly having feelings for Jeremy again, and kind of them almost having sex, which does make him look a little bit bad because he's engaged to the other lady right now. But, they set that up. At the start of the episode, there's a kind of a funny scene where she's in her bed, and keep in mind she's living in the truck still on the studio lot, and she's in the bed and she's clearly masturbating. She's watching porn on her phone, which they don't show too much of, obviously, because they can't show nudity. But the fact that we even saw someone bent over with like a gag in their mouth, I thought was actually more extreme than I would have expected. I have to say there was something very funny about the physical performance that she was given here. She was doing this sort of thing where she was kind of like jolting like every few seconds, and I wasn't sure what they were going, especially since the point of the scene is that she can't get it done. She can't finish. She's not feeling it, right? She's trying, but it's not happening. And she kind of like sort of, sighs and gives up, right? So the little jolting was a bit weird. I wasn't really sure what they were doing there. Whereas at the end of the episode, after she's had this near moment with Jeremy, after refusing to drink, which they also brought up that she shouldn't drink when she's on this trip because she might give in to her feelings. She actually did give in to her feelings anyway, but then he backed off because of like the road this will probably lead to, because he knows what she's like, and he pulls away and says, no, we're not doing this. I mean, it's pretty hot and heavy for a second though before he does that, worth mentioning. But at the end of the episode, we're back with her in her little bed, a little cot in the shelving in the truck. And this time she's watching stuff on her phone again. She is masturbating. She is succeeding and finishing. But what she's watching is like footage that she shot of her and Jeremy when they were in Mexico together on their trip, and they were kissing and having romance and blah, 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 blah. So it's clearly setting up that she still cares about Jeremy, and I wonder if him just being there and being this like witness to what she was doing was kind of like provoking her to try and do the right thing in places where she might have given into her worser impulses during the Faith story. So interesting thing to keep an eye on. Adam's still very much into her though. He tries to kiss her near the end, and she kind of backs out of it by saying, hey, are we friends? And he kind of thinks about it and says, yeah, I guess we are. And she's like, well, let's not ruin that, because I'm pretty sure right now you're my only friend, and I don't know how that happened. But that is kind of funny. Like, them working together as a team to help out Faith did make them feel like they were, I don't know, like brothers in arms, I guess. I don't know. There was a camaraderie that kind of came along with that I quite liked, and it did make everyone feel a bit more fleshed out. So future Peter here, inserting this into the past. Right after I finished recording, I just sort of went through my head, did I talk about everything? And the one big thing I didn't talk about was how the the Faith footage plot ended. I talked about how like her plot ended in terms of the the coming out and whatnot, but there's a whole bit towards the end where Chet has the footage and Chet wants to show it regardless of what it'll do to Faith because it'll get good ratings and it's sweeps week or whatever he said. And it's actually Adam who goes out of his way to say, hey, I'll give you something better if you don't show that footage. I'll give you something spicy. And he basically does like an on-screen interview talking about the sex tape that he was in, and now it's out in the open, and gives Chet his spicy story for the important episode, and thus they get the footage of Faith, and it can be destroyed, it can be wiped from existence, and they've done something nice for. It felt weird not to mention Adam doing the whole sacrifice thing. Now, admittedly, I don't think it's something that he felt that bad about. It doesn't seem like he's that embarrassed by it or that he's that fussed ultimately, but he was willing to do it all the same, even if it's a minor embarrassment or inconvenience. And that kind of, again, it earned him some good guy points, I guess. So, yeah, had to mention that. Yeah, no, that stuff was really cool. I really liked all the A plot. In fact, if I have a critique, really, about this episode, and I do have one critique that was kind of jarring to me, was the editing. It felt like it was cutting between the plots too often. And I know that sounds like a weird thing to say, but there was so many times it would cut to a B plot or C plot, because there's two. There's the which I'm about to get to in a second, but every time it cut to one of those plots, it felt like the scene would last maybe 20-30 seconds, and then it would cut back to the A plot. And it just, sometimes it felt like we were cutting around and getting really short scenes, and I felt like maybe just bundling some of them together into like, less pockets of each plot would have felt a bit smoother. It felt like it was cutting around for these short snippets a lot throughout the episode, and it felt pacing wise a bit weird compared to how they would normally pace it, not just in this show but just in any TV show really. So that was a bit odd, but I mean, minor quibble overall when I was liking the content. As for the B and C plots, the B plot we'll say is Quinn and Chet, and that Quinn is trying to sue Chet because she developed the show. She whipped out her original book, last episode. She's with the other guy, was his name Bill, who developed the show with her, and they've got a lawyer, and he looks at this book and he says, this is not enough. This doesn't prove a goddamn thing. This doesn't work. But then he says, oh, but is it true that you had a romantic relationship with Chet? And she's like, what was that got to do with anything? And then he kind of, it cuts away, but when we come back, we kind of find out that the lawsuit is changing because they know that's not going to necessarily work. But when they've got Chet sitting there with his lawyer, and his lawyer is a smarmy prick, like he just kind of keeps laughing at everything they're putting in front of him. They're like, hey, she's been in a relationship with him that he's kept secret. She's been turning down other job offers because she's been loyal to him. There's been promises that have been made that have not been fulfilled, and I can't even remember what the exact lawsuit was for, but it was basically stemming all from the affair side of her being a mistress and what that's done to her life and career and yada yada yada. Which Chet's lawyer says he's going to spin it into her stalking him, and so, like the evidence is kind of like, Chet's been very careful. He always has her use her credit card for these things, even though there'll be witnesses that say that he was at the hotels with her and stuff like that. We get some details over various scenes. The way it kind of all picks up though, or wraps up at the end, is that originally when they start this new lawsuit, which is the affair side of things, the deal that she wants is a 40% ownership of the show and all of its assets. And Chet doesn't really say much. His lawyer just kind of does all the speaking for him. And at the end of the episode, or the end of the story, I should say, he actually just kind of gives it up and gives it to her because she whips out like a piece of evidence, which is a cast that he had written on it, I love you, baby. And he effectively just has a one-on-one with her and says, you know what, you can have what you want, you kept that. And she's like, yeah, of course I kept it, it's the only time you ever I said I love you. And this is actually inspired by Shia, of all people, who, when Quinn's down on her luck halfway through the episode, she's like, hey, you're a producer, right? You're powerful. Produce him, right? Don't let the lawyer win the fight. You win the fight by producing him, by using your people skills. And yeah, she provoked an emotional response from him, and it got this reaction, and he just gives up what she wants. He's like, all right, she wants 40%, she can have it, we're done. And funnily enough, Quinn's lawyer is ready to do a dance because he thinks they've just won the lottery, and Quinn's like, go away, I'll call you later. But yeah, it's a very empowering moment. It's like, not only does she get, at least, you know, maybe what she feels she's owed. I don't know where Bill stands in all this, if he gets any like credit or ownership. Maybe she can use her side of it to like give him some, I don't know. But she is fulfilled at the end, not just because she's won, but because she won using her skills. She won by using her abilities, and I think that's something that stuck out to me about this subplot. I was not expecting this to be wrapped up at the end of the episode, though. I genuinely thought this was setting up what the plot was going to be with these characters for the rest of the season. Instead, it was just this. In fact, it's also worth mentioning that this kind of intersects with the C plot, because the C plot is Shia trying to work with Mary being the contestant who's the slightly older. She's like, I don't know, 40 or something like that. And she doesn't drink. She's got the history of having an abusive husband, and she doesn't really talk about that. And Shia basically tries to get her to loosen up and try and let the wild side of her out, and even kind of brings up the memory of her abusive relationship, and Mary gets rightly pissed off at her and storms off. And it ends up being Quinn who says, no, I'll go speak to her. Right after Shia gives her like the advice that makes her feel better about everything, she's like, no, wait, I'll go talk to Mary. I'll go do like your job. Almost as like a favor in return for like for giving her a good bit of a pep talk. And she basically walks in and says, hey, you're gorgeous, you're like, these bitches don't know what's coming, you have to be, you know, proud of yourself. And, you know, says, and she basically says, hey, is one grown woman to another, because they're maybe a similar age or close enough to it, like gives her some advice, and basically gets her kind of lights a fire under her. So yeah, Mary later on does start intentionally drinking. She does start wearing sexier clothes. There's a whole bit at the end of the episode where she's just dancing, or not even dancing, just kind of posing in front of the mirror in her underwear, saying she's still got it, like she's had this kind of thing. Now, the thing that I've glossed over here, now Shia comes across not particularly great in this episode. Between her tactics to try and provoke a reaction out of Mary, feel kind of mean, and like, Rachel's arguably quite mean at times as well with the things she brings up, but she does it more slyly in a way, where Shia just kind of like gets confrontational, and it feels like, I'm surprised she didn't get slapped. It really did feel that way. But the bigger problem, though, is that she goes into Mary's room when she's not there. She sneaks in. She finds her pills, right? Her, like, I'm gonna say pills or medication, right? She's bipolar, I think they said, or something. But she's got like basically, you know, one of those containers that's got like a little box for every day of the week, right? I don't know what you call those things, but she basically like drugs her by putting some, I don't even know what it was, but she was like pouring powder into pills and putting it into the compartments. And I was expecting that at the end of the episode, because what Quinn said to Mary got her to start drinking again, I really thought that she was going to have like a bad reaction or something, you know, based on whatever she was being given by Shia, right? Which was effectively a roofie of some kind. Like, the fact that was happening, and then she started downing booze, I thought, oh, she's going to have a reaction. You know, those two things aren't going to mix, and maybe that'll still happen. That is still entirely possible, that her, because she put one in every box. Whatever she's given her, she's taking every single day. So, honestly, her drugging her contestant comes across like I almost felt some sympathy for Shia and how everyone always favors Rachel over her for being better. But this is villain shit. You can't just drug people against their will. And also, as someone who doesn't drink alcohol, I actually kind of rooted for Mary a little bit, because when Shia brings up the alcohol thing and she says, hey, are you a recovering alcoholic or something? Mary like gets offended and says, no, I just don't drink. Like, those two things can be different. I wanted to pop for that because I've never drank alcohol, and it's just this assumption that sometimes people will make, oh, you must be a recovering alcoholic. No. Never done it. So Mary gets a bonus point from me for reacting to that. Less so for, feeling that she has to drink booze later in the episode to be the real her, regardless of whatever way they frame it. But still, yeah, I like interesting to see where this goes. I feel like there might be consequences from this. I really hope that Shia is caught in some capacity, because this is just straight up villain stuff. This is there's no way to like she has to at least get caught so that she gets consequences, and therefore if she's going to be a good character, she can redeem herself for it. But other people have to know about it. Other people have to find out about it. There has to be some comeuppance for this because it's particularly bad. So looking forward to see where that goes. But anywho, yeah, it was a good episode. It was a good episode. It might be, other than the weird editing where it was jumping between plots a bit too quick. There's an argument this is the best one so far. Hard to say, but good stuff. I have, other than that one thing, I have very little to complain about, and I think it did a lot to develop several characters in interesting ways. So, yeah, very good. That has been Unreal Episode 5. Let me know what you thought of this episode if you've seen it in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all these stuff. And of course, you can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV or via YouTube membership if you want to help keep all the shows coming, all the reviews coming, both here and over on MailFuzz Movies. But thank you very much for joining me. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?